The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm Shannon Penrod and I'm here with the fabulous Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Hi, everyone. Hi,
So
Shannon.
thrilled to be here with you this
Thank
morning.
you.
And thrilled that all of you are with us as well. We are live right now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. The date is the 16th of July. I should have known that. Yesterday was my 22nd wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow.
I know,
Congratulations.
22 years.
Amazing.
We said last year our marriage can officially drink.
That's true.
But it is the 16th of July, 2024. We're thrilled to be here with you this morning. We're going to be live for the next hour with Dr. Granpeesheh, and she's going to be answering your questions in real time. You have the opportunity right now, if you're watching live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or about a dozen other sites, to be writing in on the site that you're on, and we have the ability, because Chris Desmond is so wonderful, we have the ability to interact all from one place. So, but don't forget that this show also is available in podcast. We've been doing this show for 14 years now, and there are that many years worth of episodes that are available to you on two different YouTube channels. Some of the older ones are still available on the Autism Live YouTube channel, but there is now newly an Ask Dr. Doreen YouTube channel, so go there to check out all the things and see all the questions that she has been asked and all the answers that she has given. Don't forget, though, that it is available as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's its own podcast now. Ask Dr. Doreen. Please subscribe to it. You can get the free download wherever you get your podcasts, but don't forget, that will come with advertisements. That is the reason why it's free for you. It's a free download because of that. When you hear the ads, embrace them and think, ooh, thank you for paying for this for me. If that doesn't work for you and you're like, Shannon, I would rather pay a little bit and get it without the ads, we're happy to do that for you as well. Good morning, Raina. You can go to glow.fm, and for $5 a month, and it's actually cheaper if you do it across a year, you can get everything that we do at the Autism Network ad-free. That covers absolutely everything, including Ask Dr. Doreen, if you go to glow.fm/autism live. Okay, did I forget anything? I also want to give the disclaimer that we're going to talk about so many things during this hour, and Dr. Granpeesheh is a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for more than 45 years. My goodness, I just respect, trust, admire, adore, and I always love sitting at her feet and learning. I feel like this has been like a 15-year internship for me, learning and picking your brain. But I do want to say, disclaimer, that there is no one in this environment that could give individual specific advice. It would be unconscionable, right? It wouldn't be fair,
Right.
Because you don't have eyes on the situation. However, the good news is you can write in as much information as you would like, and we really encourage you to do that into whichever way you're writing to us. And then Dr. Granpeesheh will ask you more questions, and then you have more questions to go back and ask the person who does have eyes on the situation. So we hope that you will do that. And
Thank you.
You guys have been doing that for 14 years and telling us what a difference it has made in your lives, so we appreciate that. I need to be better about that. Anytime you guys write an email saying thank you, I try to share it with you.
Oh, yes,
Lately, I've
that's
not
lovely.
been doing it. I need to do more of that. But Raina, good morning. Good morning to you. So we always start with a topic, and today's topic is teaching job readiness skills to our children of all ages and all abilities, because I think a lot of times people think, oh, this is an 18-year-old thing. And in fact, the first question that we have suggests that maybe it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
The mom says, I have two wonderful children on the spectrum. My son is 19, my daughter is 8. I see now how my son is struggling to get work, and I have had the terrible realization that I should have been working on this for years in myriads of ways. I feel so behind. Can you help me with ideas of how to help him now? And then what should I start working on these with my daughter, and when is too soon for
Right.
job readiness skills?
I think it's important to kind of divide this task into at least two different segments. One is we have to identify what our kids are interested in and help them build those skills. So that's one thing. The other thing is we have to teach our kids job skills. And it doesn't matter what type of job, but there are certain things that are job skills. And we'll talk about that in a minute too. So what you're interested in, I think the daughter is, did you say 8 or 10 or so? That's a little early. You at that age, I think you're exposing your child to a multitude of different things and seeing what they are drawn to. And of course, as the child gets older, probably I would say, and this again also, Shannon, of course, depends on the functioning level, the level of the amount of severity, the needs that the child has. This is, again, it's such a huge spectrum and every child is different. If you are talking about a child who has, by the age of, let's say, 13 or 14, has developed the skills and capability to maybe go on to college, then your focus should be preparing them for that, right? And then later preparing them for a job. But if you have a child who is not able to attend college, or you're going through high school and you're thinking, okay, this is pretty difficult, but we're going to get through this, then that is an appropriate time for you to start looking at vocational types of things. And again, it goes back to the individual's interests, right? Like, I remember I had a young man, this is years ago, and parents were both physicians, and they were trying very, very hard to get him into some healthcare type field. And we realized over time that he just had an incredible interest in carpentry and woodworking. And so we actually gave him that initially as a leisure type activity, and it just became something that he was so good at that there was no question for anyone, the parents included, that this is where he needs to go. And so that's the direction that he ended up taking, and he was very, very happy. And when you're happy, you learn skills faster, you get better at things, and so on. So the content, the area of specialty is very important to the individual. And then there's the job skills, right? So things like, again, depending on the level of the individual and what type of job it is, we've done a lot of work with adolescents and adults on teaching them how to do a resume, how to go for a job interview, how to even look for a job, how to select something that's appropriate, and then let's move away from just the job related, but like how to take the bus to get to work, or in some cases, obviously, how to drive a car. Like there are, how do you deposit your paycheck? What is a paycheck? What do you put in as a deduction for taxes? Like all these types of things that we learn over time are important, and it's not going to necessarily pertain to every individual on the spectrum, but certainly there's going to be that 30-40% of kids who actually do get there, and you want to help them learn all that.
Yeah, and those are really overwhelming things, I think, for a lot of people.
Yes.
I mean, anytime that we just went through a thing recently because I came back to work for CARD and I had to refill out those papers and hadn't done it in a lot of years, and I was like, somebody help me! I don't remember how to do this, right? And we see that often. We see a lot of young people come in and they're like, So we shouldn't stigmatize it at all if our kids don't know how to do that, regardless of what their age or ability is. But in this conversation, I find myself thinking of Joanne Laura.
Oh,
who's
yes,
not with us anymore.
Of course.
But Joanne wrote a book I think it's called Teaching Pre-Employment Skills to 17-year-olds and above.
Great.
Something like that. She hated the title. The publisher made her change the title to that because the name of her organization was Autism Works Now.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And but the thing about the book is that it has all the forms in it that you need to teach your child of whatever age to do.
Perfect.
And she was always like, I hate that it says 17-year-old on it because you could do it with a 14-year-old depending on, if they're ready.
Right.
It's on Amazon. It might be $10. And
That's great.
It has all the worksheets in it.
That's
to
perfect.
do the paperworky kind of things. And some tips on interviewing and stuff like that. But I do think it's just important that we start working on it.
Yeah,
you
for
know?
sure. And, speaking of Joanne, she actually, the couple of groups of individuals that she was training that I met were more affected
Yeah.
on the spectrum. And she was really guiding them through things that, are pretty difficult. And she was doing a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And I think, again, we have to realize, having a job is so important. It's not just about income. Like
Yeah.
we think, oh, so-and-so should get a job because it's about having a community that you can go to and fit in with. It's about a social environment. It's about a sense of accomplishment and self-esteem. And so all of these things make it really, really important to focus on this. I don't think, because to be fair, we change our mind about things over time as we
Yeah.
get exposed, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think doing something like this below the age of, let's say, 13-ish works, because honestly at that point the individual should be focused on other things. There's a lot other stuff that
Yeah.
a 10-year-old is working on, just social behavior and games and school
Yes,
and you
yes.
name it. But I would say, depending again, if your child is able to interact with others, is doing really well, is keeping up academically, is learning all of their language and social skills, then certainly you can start asking them or seeing what their interests are somewhere in the teens.
Well, and I think it's important to delineate that exactly those kinds of things that we're talking
Yeah.
about, like building a resume and stuff. However, I think when you're playing with a 5-year-old, I love all the toys. In fact, in the toy guide, I have a pre-employment skill building that we have for babies, even because I love like all the fake kitchens.
Oh, yeah, those are so good,
And the
yeah.
beauty parlor, and they have like post office
Yeah.
and things like that, where you're pretending
It's true.
that you're being, a teacher or a firefighter or
Right.
whatever. I count that.
Yeah, the only
because it's
thing
pretending.
It is pretending, and so let me ask you,
Yeah.
like when you were young and you did this kind of stuff,
Yes.
right? Did you learn from how to be a teacher? It's too far. Do you know what I mean?
It is.
It's
I know exactly what you
you're
mean.
learning is more the skill that you're first of all hopefully enjoying, so you're
Yes.
having fun,
Yes.
and you're learning more social skills
Yes.
rather than the
Yes.
task.
Yes.
And the task is it's self-important, right?
Yes.
So, but there are, you mentioned toys and things like that, and there are a few centers. I mean, we used to have a center like this where the focus is just, and we're just talking about rehearsal, like practicing those types of skills.
Yeah.
And you bring up a really good point in that it's not just about job skills, it's also about adaptive skills, obviously, that you need just for survival. Like how to make yourself a sandwich, how to go to the supermarket, how to wash your laundry, how to make a bed, all
Yeah.
those types of things.
I'm still waiting for a million years ago, like before GEM ever had a VR thing. We went, one of the things that pushed me over the edge, we went to the Ronald Reagan Museum, and they always have installations. And they
Yes,
were having
I
a
love
VR
those.
installation,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And
yes.
of course, my kid needed to go see that. But they had a thing where you could wait in line and you got into the simulator, and it was just a blank space, right? But you got to choose one of like 4 jobs that you could be a short order cook. I have video of my husband in the space with the VR goggles. He was being a short order cook.
That's
And when you're
hilarious.
in there, you're in this, you feel like you're in this kitchen, and the order comes in, and you got to make 2 eggs
Like you're
easy
fast,
over.
yeah.
And it ends up being funny because if you don't get the order in, the people in the restaurant start throwing things at you.
Oh my
But-
gosh.
And then there was another one where Jem was being an office worker, and he was having to file stuff and process, and you are grabbing things and putting them with the
Yep.
mitts and everything, and it really feels like it. But there's a funny element to it where in the office space, if you're not doing it fast enough, your coworker will throw paper airplanes over to hit you in the head.
That's
so there was
hilarious.
always this. Now I was an astronaut. So for me, it was much more
Calm and
well, no,
you're-
because I had all these buttons that were going off.
Oh,
and,
I see.
But I had this little robot that I had to open this thing to pull the robot out. I thought it was a gas, and I kept saying somebody's going to leverage this.
Yeah.
And I think they have for driving for people
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
spectrum. But I just keep saying somebody is going to leverage this for teaching job skills to people
Well, yeah, I
around
mean,
the world, but including people on the spectrum.
Absolutely. And if pilots, they have simulators. Like
yes.
there are lots of sports now that have simulators.
Yes.
Simulators are used for a lot of different things. That's what that is. Yeah.
And it's so, I mean, it's fun because you know it's not real, but it feels real.
Yeah.
And they always program a fun element in.
So,
Anyway,
how did Jim get into writing, into screenwriting?
It's funny that you should say that because part of it was that when he was in 6th grade, that was the thing we struggled with was writing, right? There was always a BIP to get him to write anything, 2 sentences. It was hard. But they were doing poetry and everybody went nuts over his poetry and he got that praise and he was like, oh, I might be a writer. Then that kind of held him for a couple of years, but when he went to 9th grade, he had a teacher in 9th grade that, believe me, I've written letters about how amazing this man was. We both have cried over it. But he was the kind of teacher that he said, I don't care what it looks like on the page. I don't care about the mechanics. I don't care about whether you had a period. I just want you to write.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to give you as many opportunities to rewrite because you're going to get an A.
Yeah.
And if you spend the entire year working on one paper, that's fine.
Interesting.
And taking that pressure off, suddenly all this stuff came out.
Interesting.
And he went, I can tell stories. And then they would read stuff in class when it was good, and he saw that his peers felt something
From what he wrote.
from what he wrote.
Interesting.
And so that's what all of his college essays were about, was that he said, I have something to say.
That's wonderful.
And I can write something that can make people think and make people feel.
That's
and
amazing.
that feels magical to him.
That is amazing.
But then he also, at the same time, we were sort of feeding his interest in video and video making, and he was learning how to layer computer animation, taking something from, like, there was a poster, and I could talk about this forever, don't let me, but there was a poster, and he took one little corner of it, blew it up, then he took something from something else from another program, and he made this little one-eyed baseball who turned and looked at you and said, what do you want? What
Wow.
and it was this thing, and I went nuts over it. I was like, and then he showed me how he added lighting to it.
How
And then
cool.
he realized I can make this thing, but I can tell the baseball what to say.
Right.
And
right.
that was
so
the
cool.
writer,
That's
right?
amazing.
So,
yeah.
and we tried to feed that. We had sent him to computer animation camps and things
Right,
of that
right.
nature. So we tried to feed that interest.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was trying to think because my son, both
Yeah,
of our sons,
what got
studied
him
screenwriting.
interested?
I don't know. I was trying to think, and he was always a writer, right? It's like
Yeah.
from the time he was very, very young, he couldn't even really write. It was all phonetic. So we're talking about, I don't know, age 6, 7.
Mm-hmm.
Like he used to make these little books for himself where the top of it was the figure pictures and the bottom was
Yes.
the story.
Yes.
And I have those still. He
Yeah.
had hundreds of those. That's all he did all day long was write. So I think that's what led him to become, go into screenwriting. But it is very interesting because as we talk about it now, it appears to me that like a lot of it has to do with people, how the child feels successful.
Yeah.
What makes them feel good about themselves at
Yeah.
a young point, and then that leads them in that path,
Yeah. I mean, I remember being a child and realizing that 2 things. One, if you can make people laugh,
Yeah.
it's everything.
It is everything.
everything.
I totally agree.
And I was like, okay, I want to do that. And then the other thing was that, like, if you could figure out how to teach somebody how to do something, that was power too.
Yes, yes.
That was a powerful thing. So I always wanted to be a teacher, and I always wanted to make people laugh.
Right,
And,
right.
And I think, I learned along the way that for me, that's telling stories.
Right.
I'm a storyteller. When
Yes.
people ask me, who are you? And I'm like, I'm a storyteller. That's what I
Yeah.
do. I'm a
Yeah.
storyteller.
Yeah.
But I always want the story to teach, and I always
Right.
want the story to make people laugh. So,
Right.
but how did you realize that you wanted?
Psychology. I think I honestly, people always ask me, how did you choose this field? And I
Yeah.
didn't. I think it chose me.
Uh-huh.
I was pre-med, right? I was heading towards pre-med, and it was a lot of work, and it was very, very hard. And I just loved my psych courses because it was so fun, and they were just so much, like, just so much fun in contrast to bio and chem and stuff, right? And psych is always like human behavior, so it was always a lot of fun. I still went through and would have actually applied and gone to med school if it wasn't for the work that I did at UCLA. So it was kind of like, it was, with med school, you don't really have access to patients for many, many, many years, right?
Yeah.
You're just studying boring stuff for a long time before you actually get to the clinical side. And at least at UCLA and the clinical, in psychology, we had exposure to the autism project.
Right.
Or I did, and I was very early on, and therefore I was able to interact with kids on the spectrum very early on.
Yeah.
And so I was an undergrad when I was working with kids on the spectrum, and it was just a lot more, I guess, meaningful than studying organic chem. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, it was just like, wow, this is definitely
Powerful.
what I want to do. It's so much more fun. And it was intriguing. So back then, right now it's so much of a business, and back then it was more of a puzzle and a something we all have to solve. And I
Well, you were
love
pioneers.
solving.
You were pioneers.
Right. And it was just, nobody knew much about it. It was like, what is going on with these kids? What's happening in their brain? What do they think? And those are probably my two skills. One is I love problem solving, and the other one is I love getting into and seeing the world from someone else's perspective.
Yes.
So that's what it was. It was a combination of looking at the children, working with them, and trying to figure them out. And that's, I think, what kept me. As
That's
well
why-
as the moms. I've always said, I think a big part of it for me was also the parents, like just helping the parents.
Yeah. This is wonderful. I think I may have mentioned this to you, but I'm writing the story of your life.
Oh my
in
God.
my spare time. I'm not far. I'm right where you're meeting Lovas. And so it's good for me to hear these stories.
Yeah,
Now I know
yeah.
what to do with that. Okay. I digress greatly. So, Rodney, we're saying hello to you too. By the way, you guys can write in questions about whatever you would like. Please don't wait until the last 10 minutes, because we know that raises my blood pressure when all of a sudden you all write in and I'm like, I don't know if we're going to have time for this. So please write in now your questions. I love this question. My son was diagnosed at 3. The school has offered us OT, and at that time the school offered us OT, and I remember thinking, wow, they're serious about getting our kids jobs already. Then I discovered that they were really only going to work with him on fine and gross motor, which is fine, but when, where, and who gets our kids ready to work, and do I have to find that out on my own? Similar to the last question, but, I think this is a very important question for parents, because I think parents feel left alone on the job skill front. You have been a part of something that there's a curriculum, if people are interested.
Yeah, definitely. Our skills for living is our adult curriculum, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's really, really useful for job skills.
Yeah.
I think there are more and more programs developing. The issues, Shannon, as you know, is that a lot of behavioral ABA type programs don't even take adults or adolescents, right? What I see is people cutting off at a certain age just because they only want to work with intensive early intervention for young kids who are, different program, different story altogether. But as individuals age and become adolescents and adults, then if the program accepts that person into if they have a program for adolescents and adults, then a lot of it is focused on job training.
Yeah.
But as I said, if you learn, let's say you want to do a job. One of my most severely affected individuals that I worked with years ago, an adult, was really, really had a very significant deficits, right? He was nonverbal, had a lot of challenges. When I first met him, he was just extremely unhappy. The environment around him wasn't fair at all, and he would just, put his head through glass. He was just very angry about all the people around him, and he wasn't being treated well. He was in a day center, right? And he was constantly put in timeout, that sort of thing. It was horrible. And we, honestly, the first thing we did was we trained him on an iPad. We taught him how to ask for things and how to express himself on an iPad. And as we did that, we realized things started to calm down. Like, he just started to become a happier individual in terms of he wasn't aggressing anymore, because now he could actually ask for some things and he could ask for breaks and so on. And then we ended up teaching him all sorts of stuff from, making a sandwich for himself. And then gradually we went on to like teaching him how to go shopping and how to walk the dog and like tons of stuff like that. And it ended up that as he expanded his daily living skills, we also then started to, he was now maybe 18 or 19 or so, we started to actually look for possibilities of jobs. And like one of the things that we had found at that time was, and I have another story after this too, but was Goodwill. Goodwill does have a lot of opportunities where you can actually go in and sort things. And sorting is a skill that a lot of our folks learn early on. And so one of the things that was fantastic for him was that he was very good at matching. And the job that we found him at Goodwill was matching the shoes that were gonna, because they were all over the place, right? It was a pile of things people had donated. And he would like match them, put an elastic around them, and then that was the next one and the next one. And that became like something that he could do really, really well. And actually it expanded after that, because he then learned how to hang things up, and it went further. And honestly, Shannon, if you looked at this young man over the course of just 5 years, he went from a very, very distraught human being who really didn't want to have anything to do with anyone to a functional adult in society. And it was a really great thing that happened. But I think it started with just meeting his needs, making sure he can integrate and communicate. When I was very young, I don't remember what age I was, my gosh, it was a while ago. I was an undergrad at UCLA, and I found a job, I don't even know how, in Virginia, which was working in a very large factory with adults on the spectrum. And it was a really, really interesting position, because I will never forget the first day I went into this. We're talking truly factory, like it was a massive warehouse, and you'd go in and there were and so this, just to give some perspective and timing, we're talking the 80s, right? Or maybe even 70s and 80s.
So now I'm picturing
early
big
80s.
hair.
Big hair, probably. Probably, yes, curls and all that. Unless, those were the days where you wouldn't straighten, you would get perms. Right. So, but this factory was like all these adult individuals, and they were doing sorting tasks. And that actually gave me so many ideas when we were writing the curriculum, because there are so many things that are sold that require some form of sorting. For example, button factories, right? They require someone to actually put buttons of a similar type in small boxes. And I remember that was a task that I worked with a few adults and taught them how to do that. So it really, and let me tell you, that is where I learned that's where I observed the sense of self-esteem and accomplishment that these individuals had, because they would come to work, they would get something accomplished, and they would feel good about themselves. This is why, as you know, my neighbor is someone who used to work with Joanne Lara, and I always feel really bad, because he was on his way to having that. Like Joanne Lara's group had this very awesome, even though they didn't meet that frequently, they had a sense of community. And there's just not enough of those placements for our individuals. I agree.
Her work did not survive her death.
Unfortunately not.
Yes, unfortunately not. But I will say, we try to talk about a lot of the things that Joanne talked about, and one of the things that goes hand in hand with what this I think it's a dad that had written in about, that there is something called the ITP process when you're at school. And I think it's a federal law. Schools have to participate in this, but so many of them don't, and so many parents don't know that when, in some states it's 14, in all states it has to be implemented by the time your child is 16. This is really important. I didn't know this before Joanne taught me this. But I say to parents, when your child turns 14 at their IEP, ask at school about the ITP. It stands for Individual Transition Plan.
Yeah.
And it's just one more thing in addition to your IEP, and it's responsible for 3 things. It's responsible for looking at where your child will live when they
Yes.
are done.
Yes.
And the school has to help you to figure something out. A lot of times they'll go, we just assume they're going to live with you. Well, don't say to them, I'm not planning on living forever. So make them work on that with your child, right? Another thing is that it's supposed to work on what will be your child's safety net of their community. Who are the people who will be there? And that's not just you.
Yes.
That's like other people, friends, doctors, lawyers, whatever they need. They're supposed to build the community. And then the third thing is, where will they work? There is a
Right,
presumption
right.
that they will all work. And we see schools, if the parents push and say, are we starting the ITP? And I always say to people, ask at the 14-year-old IEP meeting, are we doing this? They will always give you the answer, well, no, we don't do that till they're 16. And that is when you remind them, well, we need to implement it. On their 16th birthday, it has to be in place, which means we have to plan ahead of time.
Yeah.
And that opens the conversation. So when you go to the 15-year-old IEP, you really push it and you keep saying to them, but remember, it has to be in place by their 16th birthday. Because if you do have it in place by their 16th birthday, they have to find your child internships.
Right.
They have to find them, starter jobs. And if you wait for them to figure that out when they're 16, that means you implement at 7, which means 17, you only have a year maybe, or
Right.
if you're doing extended, you've got a couple more years. So please, please, please lean into the ITP process, so that the school, you're not alone.
Right. Absolutely right. Totally right.
And then I don't know about you, but I'm seeing many, many, many more programs that people are starting to teach entrepreneurs. I can't talk today. Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
There we go. And they start with teenagers on the
Interesting.
spectrum. If there's
Interesting.
something, like we've seen girls that make bracelets, like
Right.
think about Siri, and the wonderful things that she makes. There's a kiddo who's got a protein bar company.
Oh, wow.
That there are all kinds of things that are out
I mean,
there.
I think you could even consider Nicholas, I guess, with his art,
Yes.
right? Nicholas Contaxis, he has
Absolutely.
incredible art.
Well,
that-
Wyatt now too. Wyatt.
Is he selling the
Oh,
art?
yes.
Oh, that's
they
amazing.
take commission. If a lot of times when an animal dies and people ask for all kinds of things. In fact, Sienna had her goats. She commissioned goat paintings.
Right.
So yeah, they take commission, and people have portraits of their dogs, whether they've passed or not.
That's nice.
And they're lovely. So
Yeah,
yes, he's
yeah.
working. He's a
That's
working
great.
artist.
That's great.
Love that.
That's awesome.
Yes. So, and there is something about that too.
100%.
The self-esteem, and you get a little bit more leeway about
Yes.
what your needs are when you're working for yourself.
Yeah.
Comes
But
with
it
a whole
is
host of other problems.
Absolutely. But it is a lot of, it's just so, I just want to acknowledge, because I've seen some parents who've dedicated their life to this. Siri's mom is a good example. Nicholas's mom is a good example. Jared's mom is a good example. And it's a lot of work for a
yeah.
parent. And,
I think of Rachel Bird. She's
Yes.
his manager.
Yes.
She's a momager.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a full-time job.
it is a full-time job, and it is a lot of effort. It's
Yes.
a lot of resource and effort, I have to say. Yeah.
Yes.
Like Jared, the job that we got for Jared so they kind of made a company for him where he would take, because they live near an area where there are boating and yachts and so on, and so people always need help carrying their stuff from their car to the boat and back.
Nice.
So that became his company. I think it's called Jared's something helpers or something. Yeah,
I
it's
love
pretty
that.
cool. Yeah.
I love that. It's that thing, right, about you see a need, fill it.
Exactly.
There you go.
exactly. Yeah.
Amazing. Somebody wants to know, can you give some tips for things to do with teens over the summer to get them ready to have a job in a couple of years, or not have them just be couch potatoes? How about that?
Yeah, honestly, that's so true. And again, it goes back to the different types of jobs and the interests and the tasks. And so it really has more to do with your child's interests. And I think you start to pay attention to those very early on, right? You notice the things they're just into.
Yeah.
And it might change. I mean, I'm looking at my kids and they changed their interests multiple times.
Yeah.
But, and you know, I look at my older daughter and she has 100 different interests. So I don't, like,
Yeah.
she just has, she's so
You could
good
put
at
her
so many
anywhere
things.
and she would.
But she
would
has
thrive.
decided to kind of bring two of her primary interests together. Like,
Really?
well, so what, you know, she's getting her doctoral degree in psychology, right? So she's she will be a psychologist and that's what she wants to do. But at the same time, she's very interested in children. She loves children. She really does. And at the same time, she's a very creative artist,
Yeah.
right? Both in terms of photography and her writing skills are incredible, but she's an artist. She draws, right?
Yeah.
You've seen
Yeah.
some of her
Oh, my
sketches, which
goodness.
are amazing. So she wants to do psychology self-help books for teenagers and
How
kids where
wonderful.
she would also illustrate, right? She does the
Wonderful.
illustration. Yeah. And so that's you know, but you realize these things pretty early on. And let me tell you, every summer we were working on a ton of different skills with all three of the kids. And they were based on things that they wanted to learn, you know, and they wanted to engage in and do. And you guys, I've said this before, but the summer shouldn't be, I mean, obviously all of our kids need time to rest, right? Everybody needs time to rest. But the more structured you can make the summer, the more everyone will benefit and be happy. It needs to be structured. No kid is happy at the end of a 3 month period where they've done nothing.
Yeah.
Just getting back to school will be
a
very hard
nightmare.
for them.
It's a nightmare.
So structuring is so important, and you can structure it. I looked at summer as my opportunity to teach my kids how to structure their own lives.
Yeah.
Because when you're in academics, when you're in school, they just tell you what to do and you do it, right?
Yeah.
Your life is just about getting ready for school and doing whatever they tell you to do in school.
Yeah.
But with the summer, you have this opportunity to teach them to, you know, do something with their home, like maybe redecorate your room, clean
that's a
up your
great
room,
idea.
organize your room, get rid
Yeah.
of clothes you don't wear,
Yeah.
like make it clean, make it fresh. It's a thing we do in Iran for New Year, which is
Yes.
March, where you basically you're supposed to do that. There's a word for it even, which is moving the house, which basically means you just clean out. You clean out, right? And you just do that every year. You're supposed to do that. And the summer is a fantastic time to do that. Teach them a skill of cooking, which, listen, every human being needs to know how to cook something.
Yeah.
So that's a very useful skill. Teach them a sport or a physical activity so that they have. So you're like trying to teach them a variety of things, but breaking up their day and teaching them how to. Like when I used to take my kids to Europe because their dad was German, we would always have like, okay, who's gonna make breakfast today?
Right.
And we'd focus on that, and then we would like have a period of homework, which I would keep them going on their like worksheets for the following year, right? So they would do like 1 or 2 hours of homework. Then we would do a craft, which was, I don't know, tie-dye t-shirts or build something. And then we would do an exercise period so that every day my kids got into the habit of working out, and all three of them work out, you know?
great.
So that was a big part of it. And it was just about having a routine.
Yes.
And I think that is something that helps all of our kids over the summer.
We were talking about this just the other day that, you know, I learn things all the time and then forget them. And one of the things that I learned, that we all learned in my family over COVID, was that if we don't have a regular amount of exercise, that we don't self-regulate.
Right. Oh,
And
totally.
yet I forget that on a regular basis.
Yes.
And then I have to be reminded of it, but that like even beyond the benefits of everything else.
Yes.
That in order just to self-regulate,
100%.
there has to be a certain amount of exercise.
Right.
Now, one of the things that Temple Grandin says is she frequently says, let's get our kids volunteering.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the last time that she was on, we kind of talked about the fact that that is not as easy as it used to be. That just
That's true.
taking your kid.
That's actually true.
I mean, we live very close to a dog shelter, and you can't just walk in and go,
No.
hey, can I, shovel some dog poo for you today? You have to go through a background check, and you have to do all
Oh,
this
yeah.
stuff, and you have to commit to a certain number of hours. And I guess I just want the collective hive mind to think about, like, if you have a situation where you could have volunteers, about putting that out there to the autism community, but do you have suggestions about, like, what, in this climate, how people can volunteer? We get that
It's
question
so hard.
sometimes even here, and I'm always like, oh, I don't really have anything right
So,
now
yeah,
today.
No, and actually, it's funny you bring that up because, like, now we are involved with multiple companies, you and I.
Yes.
And CARD, for instance, is it's an LLC, it's a corporation. We cannot take volunteers.
Right,
We're not allowed
right,
to take
right.
volunteers because anyone who does anything for that company, we got to pay.
Right.
So that's that. A 501c3 company like ACT, which is a charity, we can take volunteers, but they have to, we have to adhere to certain rules, right? If they're going to have contact with any of our kiddos, we need to make sure they have background checks and all this sort of stuff. So that's a whole different thing. But one way that I think you can, like the easiest way I've come to find is through school community service.
Yeah.
And there are lots of school, or through church. Churches do this as
Yes.
well, or your place of worship, whatever that may be. There are ways to do community service through those entities, and then you can be placed anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So, like when my kids were in middle school, elementary school, they had both, all middle and high, but those were like religious schools, but they had a very, very active community service program.
Yeah.
That you would then be placed in all kinds of environments, whether it was dog shelters or senior housing,
great.
where you would go and talk to people and entertain them. There's lots of opportunities, but I think you have to go through an agency like a school
That
or
makes perfect
religious.
sense.
Yeah.
I remember my mother used to make me go next door. There was an elderly lady who lived next door, and I would have to go over and say, what can I help you with today? Can I take your trash out or whatever?
Yeah, that's
and
so
she
nice.
quickly learned that she would set me up in her dining room, and I would have to polish all of her silver.
Oh my gosh.
And so, like days in the summer, every summer I'd be over there just polishing silver.
That's actually not a bad task, though. I've done that. It's kind of a fun thing.
Well,
'cause-
we would talk,
Yeah,
and I would learn
okay.
all these things about her, and I'm deeply
That's
interested
so
in the
nice.
experience of people that have lived during different time periods,
Yes.
still to this day,
Yes, of
because
course.
her name was Nora, and I would sit there with Nora, and the funny thing was, when Nora died, she left her dining room table in hutch to me, because I had polished all
Yeah,
the silver
aw.
and everything, and it was part of my growing up, was polishing Nora's silver.
That's
And
amazing.
my mother was like, you do that, and that's a volunteer. Now, Nora would slip me, a couple of bucks and be like, get yourself an ice cream or something like that.
How
So
old were you?
I was like 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, that's
Um,
perfect.
And I think by the time I was like 13 or 14, she had passed.
Oh.
But she was a card, man. She was a
Yeah.
real trip, and I would learn about things that
Yeah.
that led to other things that I was interested in
Right.
as a result of that.
Right.
So I think it's good for our kids to go do something with somebody else.
That's very true. Yeah, absolutely. It kind of does open their eyes and their world. Absolutely right. Yeah, I was just thinking of all the old people that were my neighbors that I used to do things for. It's funny, and old people are fun because not only do you learn a lot, but they are in the mode of giving stuff away. It's like,
are.
you take this, you take that. It's so much fun.
And they're deeply appreciative
They're
of
awesome.
younger people.
You just learn so much.
Yes,
yeah.
being interested in them. I think of always when Jem, the first full time you got to be here at this time in your
Oh, right,
thing,
right.
was him working at the Ed Asner Family Center, and I was so nervous about it.
Yeah.
But I always remember that the other part of it, because I think volunteer is great, but I do think the paycheck, when they're doing a lot of
Yeah.
work. I remember the first
Yeah.
paycheck that he got, and he was like, really? This changes everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, it does? And he was like, I just did that, and I had a whole lot of fun, and a place to go where people appreciate me, and I got paid.
Yeah.
And I can do that every week.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, no, he's not going to want to do school.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we've been able to balance that. But, and I remember calling Joanne Laura and going, okay, I get it. And she would always say, everybody deserves a seat at the table, and you don't get a seat at the table unless you have a job.
Yeah.
And I remember when I met her, I thought that, well, because a lot of times still, even now, people say, well, not everyone can work, right? And they
Yeah.
always say it that way. Well, not everyone could work.
Yeah.
And Joanne used to call foul on that and say,
Yeah.
yep, no, everybody can. And
Yeah.
everybody should. We just got to find the right job, the right context, the
Yeah.
right thing
Yeah.
where they can feel like, and I remember one of her kids in particular, which, he's one of our gentle giants,
Mm-hmm.
and he still is considered nonverbal. Although, he has a couple of words, and he texts like just a champ.
Wow.
I remember being someplace with his dad, and his dad said, have you ever seen what he texts? And he showed me, and I was like, holy Christmas. Now, a lot of it is I would like soda, because he really wants soda,
Yes, yes.
but a lot of other stuff, too. And I was amazed.
Mm.
And I remember, because Joanne had a truck that was called Glorious Pies, and they would go around to different locations, and she would staff it, and they would show up, and they had their aprons on, and everybody had a different job. And this young man who is nonverbal, they were at one place, and they had flyers, and she sent them out and said, hand out the flyers, because it was a discount off the coffee and the pie. And I don't know who was with him, but they weren't paying attention. And suddenly he was among the missing. And there was
Oh,
panic.
God.
There was panic, and what are we going to do, and whatever. It's because he was still giving the flyers out. He wasn't missing. He was doing his job.
Finishing his job.
He was finishing his
Yeah.
job. When the
Yeah.
other ones had sort of said, I'm done, people aren't taking the flyers, he was going and he went to the bathrooms to
Yeah.
find people with flyers.
Yeah.
He was totally safe,
Yeah.
and they kind of changed the way they were doing things, and the person who was in charge of him was no longer in charge of him. But everything was okay because he was on the job, and he was going to give every single one of those flyers away.
Right.
And, it just was very eye-opening to me about that, and now he doesn't have a job.
Yeah, these are the things that just break my heart.
Yeah.
And I often talk about this as well, Shannon, is that, especially nowadays, when the vast majority of people are working from home, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just the way it is after COVID, and people and with the technology that we have, people have realized that it is possible to work from home.
Yeah.
And so as a corporation, you often wonder how many hours a day people are actually working, right?
yeah,
As
I'm
opposed
sure.
to doing 500 other things that
Yes.
are part of their lives.
Yes.
And I've always said the thing that is so amazing and spectacular about individuals on the spectrum is their honesty
Yeah.
and integrity, which just is part of who they are. Every single one. You will never see a person on the spectrum cutting a responsibility short. That's just not
gonna
going to happen.
It's not
When
gonna
they learn something and they realize that is their responsibility, they will do it
Yeah.
to the absolute end, to the best of their capability. They will never be dishonest about it.
Yeah.
That's, a very, very valuable thing.
It is beyond valuable.
Yeah.
All right, so now we need to open a coffee shop, too.
I
and
know.
Staff it with
I
people.
wish. I honestly wish that I would love to do something like that. I feel like it would be such a fun thing. Of course, it's difficult. What Joanne did was a hard job. It wasn't easy.
No,
but
no. It's a very hard job.
Yeah,
But we
yeah.
see more and more of those popping up. There's the car washes and
Yes, yes,
there are coffee shops
Yes.
and donut shops and things that are popping up everywhere. That the main focus, of course, we have people that were started out as viewers, and they have a business where they make T-shirts and things, and they're staffing it with people
Right.
that
Right.
are uniquely qualified.
Right.
And
And the car shop thing that started, I think, in New Jersey was a young man. I met him actually several years ago, whose brother was on the spectrum,
Right,
right? And he started this company, and it was a very successful car wash. And he started to hire more and more neurodivergent people, and it just became a business. And I think I haven't, it's been a few years since I met that young man. I think that his business actually grew, and I think that they have multiple
Yes.
car washes because they were, and then of course there's the other side of the, you have also individuals who are uniquely talented in areas that we struggle with, like technology, computers,
Yeah.
robotics, and all of that. And there are several companies now. Actually, they reach out to us on a frequent basis, saying they're placement organizations where they are offering individuals who have autism, who are very talented and trained
Yeah.
in various aspects of software or hardware technology, and they are looking for jobs for them in companies where they can assist in tech or IT or, some other area.
Well, and here's another resource that I never talk about that I'm being really pushed by the universe to talk about, which is the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation.
Sure.
Which I got to be honest, people told me about, but because we didn't see that we needed it for GEM, I just didn't investigate it that much. But I really see recently that I've fallen down on the job because then I don't have that in my hip pocket to talk with everybody else about. And when we went to the Autism and Entertainment Conference,
Which we should also talk about.
yes, but it was sponsored in large part by the Department of Vocational
you go.
Rehabilitation. And somebody came up to me and said, well, you're very familiar with them. And I was like, no, I don't know them. And I just recently had on the show a speech and language pathologist who works very particularly with the California Department of, anyway, so I've been talking with them. We're going to get them on the show, but that is a great resource. There's another place that you can go with your child. They do go through a whole process. And then they assign a caseworker, and they will help them. One of the stories that I was told at the Autism and Entertainment, because I think a lot of parents go, oh, well, that doesn't involve my child. And there was a young woman who, she'd never had a dance class a day in her life. And now she was 18 years old, and when they interviewed her and said, what do you want to do? What are you? She said, I'd like to be a dance teacher. Well, she's never had a dance class in her life. But they found her a job in a dance studio.
Amazing.
So she was working the front desk, and now it's a couple of years later, and she's teaching one of the classes.
That's awesome.
I mean, they're making dreams come true. So Department of
Absolutely.
Vocational, we're going to have them on the show soon. But let's talk about autism and entertainment.
Well, so that's a whole nother area, right? Which was
Yeah.
also a mom of one of our former kiddos, and she wanted to open the doors of the entertainment industry as a vocational resource.
Yeah.
And from what I hear, she's doing extremely well, and that organization is also helping a lot of individuals find positions in the entertainment industry.
I'll tell you, you need to get on their mailing list because they send you stuff that's good.
Yeah.
It's like stuff that I'm like, whoo, everybody wants to know about this. I forwarded stuff
Yeah.
to you because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you're in the know. And they're doing like mini virtual seminars now. They did a 1 day in person, which if you weren't in LA, you couldn't get to, and it kind of filled up and was full, so nobody
Wow.
else could come. But now they're doing them virtually, so if you want to be...
What are they on? Just various skills?
All different kinds of things. There's one coming up right now that's about voiceover acting.
Oh,
and they
wow.
and it's like a workshop where they've got people, they've got a casting director, someone who is an actor that does voiceover, and I think an agent, a casting director, agent, and an actor, and they're gonna, so that's. But I've seen them on other things as
Yeah,
well. That
yeah.
different topics, different kinds of things. Like I think there was one on animation not that long ago. So very interesting. They're kind of moving and shaking. And so if you go to Autism in Entertainment, I think it's .org. You should be able to find a way to get on their mailing list.
That's awesome.
Now,
yeah.
my question is, you had sponsored the research for the conference. I don't know if it's been enough time yet. Have you gotten anything from
No,
them?
not yet.
I
yeah.
met the wonderful person who was doing the research, and because you weren't able to be there that day,
Right,
and she thanked me profusely to take back to you. But I said, she loves research. She's going to want to see that when
Yeah.
you have it. So when she has it, I'm sure she'll get it
Yeah,
to you.
I hope
that you
so.
can-
Yes.
I said I made sure that she knew that you would geek out on it. That
Yeah,
you would not
absolutely.
only want to see it, that you would really love to see it.
Absolutely, yes,
So,
definitely.
very cool. You guys are very quiet today, so we're just talking. But you got 6 minutes left if you want to ask questions. I don't know that I said hello to Rodney. And remember, if this topic is not your topic, you can write in about just about anything. I do want to ask you, because somebody asked this question the other day, and I said, well, we'll try to talk about this here. And I had Moira comment a little bit on it yesterday too. People were asking questions about, how do I know if my child has leaky gut? Where would I go to get that tested? What would that necessarily look like? Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. It's just such a complicated subject, and it's such a difficult time right now because there's so many other gastrointestinal issues that are going on. But
Amen.
so leaky gut is just like, let's talk about that for a minute, what it actually is, which is kind of interesting. So when we eat proteins, we typically will, the process of digestion is to break down the protein into peptides, which are chains of amino acids, and then further into amino acids. And then those amino acids travel through the bloodstream and get to all the various organs and give us nutrition and so on. What happens with leaky gut is that a couple different things. One is that first of all, it's been shown, a lot of research shows that a lot of individuals, now not just individuals on the spectrum, they were I always say that, when you go to a restaurant and you see that they have a gluten-free option, this all started with autism, and you know it and I know it. And if you're in the field of autism, you know that the world of autism is what brought about these changes.
You know that the celiac community thinks that they did.
I know.
You and I both know that it was the autism
It wasn't
moms.
because the celiac community used to be very small.
Yes.
And now, of course, it's a lot bigger. And that was kind of my point, is that it went in the order of very small celiac community, then a large community of individuals with autism who had gastrointestinal inflammation. And then now the general population has so many other GI inflammation issues that it pertains to all of us. So what happens is that if you have a lot of inflammation in your gut, which we do for a multitude of other reasons having to do with toxicity and all of that, then what happens is that your gut lining over the course of time is getting thinner and thinner, and it will actually have, I don't want to say holes in it, but the chemical permeability changes. So then you start to leak what is in your stomach and intestines. And what you're leaking is these peptides, because you also do not have the ability to break the peptide down all the way to amino acids. So that when we're talking about leaky gut, we're literally talking about these protein peptides of certain types leaking through or being more permeable through the gut lining. And that causes all kinds of mischief in the body. It just produces a really bad cycle of inflammation. It causes an endorphin feeling to the brain, because that leakiness then goes through also the blood-brain barrier, and it gets to the brain, and now you feel kind of like high when you eat these foods. So it causes all kinds of problems for digestion, and the problem is that nowadays there are so many people struggling with this kind of inflammation that there's just a lot of chaos. There are people who have SIBO, right? Small intestine bacterial overgrowth. That's one. That will cause similar symptoms. There are people that just have some sort of colitis, just inflammation. There are people who are very allergic to certain types of foods, like celiac. There's all kinds of gastrointestinal inflammatory illnesses that are all resulting in this leaky gut phenomenon. And it's very uncomfortable. It's bloating, it's discomfort after eating. It's all kinds of things that throw you off. And obviously, if you have discomfort in your GI tract, that's going to affect your daily functioning. It's going to affect your sleep. It's going to affect your immune response, your immune system. 80-90% of your immune system is in your gut. So you basically will have immune issues, which will now compound everything. Illnesses of the GI tract are very, very serious.
Well, I always say, try to learn trigonometry while you're running to the bathroom for diarrhea.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Nobody can.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we expect our children to learn language and
Absolutely.
social rules and all of this if they're having anything going on.
Anything. How do we expect them to function?
Yeah. It's crazy. We're pretty much out of time, so let me just say thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have live shows for a little while. Towards the end of August, we'll be back with live shows, but for Ask Dr. Doreen, we're going to be showing you some of the best ofs, but we're not going away permanently. You have to go away for a little while, and then I have to go away for a little while.
And unfortunately, they're not the same
We didn't
time.
coordinate. We didn't coordinate. But we will be back end of August, and we hope that you guys will be there and have a bunch more questions for Dr. Granpeesheh. Let me tell you a little bit about what's happening the rest of this week. Tomorrow, we're having a really amazing self-advocate. Daniel Durrani is going to be with us. He's someone who got a late diagnosis, however, had been nonverbal, and now is a self-advocate talking about how he went from being nonverbal to having a family of his own.
Nice.
And autonomy, and how important autonomy is. So he's going to be with us tomorrow. On Thursday, we're doing a Best of Autism Live where we're talking about diet. Autism diets, kind of going
Perfect.
hand in hand with what we were talking about. And then on Friday, we have a Best of Ask Dr. Doreen. I thought this was a really particularly amazing show that you were on point, talking about how difficult it is sometimes to know when to discipline an individual on the autism spectrum. That sometimes we don't get it right. We never want to be disciplining somebody for something that they're not able to do. But on the other hand, we don't want to just have our child run riot and never be disciplined for things that they could learn to do differently.
Absolutely.
So the conversation was had about that. You guys can watch that on Friday. And then we are back on Monday. Much more shows. We got a bunch of really great shows. Andy Bondi is going to be on in August.
Oh, wonderful.
Isn't that wonderful? He was the
That's
original
awesome.
creator of PECS. So I'm really excited about that in particular. But there's a bunch of really great guests coming up. Really looking forward to it. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, thank you to Dr. Granpeesheh.
Thank you so much.
Give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We hope to see you there.